Have you ever asked yourself, what is the center of gravity? This might conjure up thoughts of some guy under a tree and an apple. Instead, I want you to think of the center of gravity as you know it. Across my life, like most people from cities, the center of gravity involves sitting on a stoop, watching people walk by, calling out to neighbors, keeping a careful eye on children as they play on sidewalks, and most importantly, telling stories. Now, the stories vary. Sometimes it's about catching up, joshing with one another about foolish things said or done, keeping people up to speed on who's in trouble and who needs help. But no matter what, it is one of the most vibrant ways that us city folk maintain a sense of community. It's in this space of being in relation with one another that we figuratively lock arms around the parameters of our neighborhood and collectively remind one another, I got your back. I live somewhere now where there is no stoop and no one really talks to each other, and my center of gravity is somewhere 1,100 miles away in the last real community I lived in on Grand Street. But people didn't drive down Grand Street and think community. Nah, usually people avoided driving down Grand Street altogether, and if they did venture our way, typically the story told is one of abandoned houses, gun violence, gangs, drugs, and urban decay. Our story is one already written, where the city is a skeletal system of disparities, problems, and risks. Now, don't get me wrong, we need to pay attention to the problems in order to foster resolutions in communities like mine. Research estimates from the last decade indicate that there are more than 1 million youth gang members in the United States, far more than estimates from law enforcement agencies. This is an 11% increase from the previous decade, with 1 out of every 50 young people between the ages of 5 and 17 reporting being actively affiliated with a gang. And rates are growing fastest in small and mid-sized cities. Community violence remains one of the leading causes of death for young people, especially those living in high-poverty metropolitan communities. The risks are real. Young people living in cities are often depicted in reference to the extant risk factors and social determinants that underscore critical social issues. Yet, city youth are far more than the risk that the public narrative characterizes and the pervasive historical pathology of being urban that imbues social research, skewing the ways that we talk about and for young people without actually taking the time to talk to them. I'm asking you to listen to the stories you haven't considered. Stories are a way to connect, a representation of the experiences and feelings that bridge human relatedness and interconnect people who seemingly have separate lives, and yet these details somehow tie us together. The center of gravity for communities like mine are the spaces and places where we congregate and are reminded that storying is reclamation. I'm a city kid, well, now an urban scholar, and my roots in North Philadelphia segued into rooting my professional self in raising my kids in Albany, New York. I spent the first half of my life trying to get out, and now the second half going back in. I've seen the inherent challenges of building a program of research rooted in urbanicity, including the dismissal of literacies and colloquialisms of city folks like myself. We have to shapeshift and enter into spaces that consistently question who we are and where we're from, how we talk, and like many scholars, I've trained myself to function in identity borderlands. Tying our stories to our work is crucial in order to reorient an at-risk to an at-promise paradigm. Traditional research with young people in cities is deeply rooted in deficit perspectives, focused on prevention and disrupting seemingly implicit risk factors. While this research has tremendous merit, outsiders looking in miss the rich communities that urbanicity fosters, pocked by visible issues surely, but embodying nurturance, authenticity, joy, and the interconnection that is not bound by kinship and centers at-promise young people. How can I translate into research the role of Mrs. Patterson sitting at the top of her stoop and keeping us in line while our parents work? How can I show you the beauty of guys at the basketball court teaching kids jump shots so we wouldn't find any trouble? Or the role of Abdul, the self-proclaimed mayor of Grand Street, ready at any moment to help you get your groceries inside and encouraging you to check out what he's got for sale in his cart that day? These experiences are not found in statistics, but rather in stories. Stories that young people like Darian, Rashid, and Michael, and so many others capture and turn into the most amazing films and powerful acts of community advocacy, all while training nearly 2,000 young people since 2008 how to embrace who they are and where they come from, with translatable skills to transform their community. So I'm going to tell you a story about a socially engaged art program called Youth FX. a program that breathes life into reclaiming a sense of community through storytelling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Say what?
In 2008, Darian joined a new summer filmmaking program, and Darian noted, "I was always quiet the first few years, but I was listening. I loved the idea of transformative process, creating imagery of people that look like me and sound like me, films that are made by people like me. I learned that my words matter, my ideas mattered, and that I matter." So one day, the teenage director of the film the group was working on got stuck with a flat tire. Pensive and detail-oriented, Darian was asked to step up and direct. It was a natural fit, and soon she was directing more films and began to watch how the whole process emerged. A constellation of interactions between people carefully guided by the leading concept that the thoughts and ideas of each young person in that program was critical. It wasn't about the final film product, it's about the process. Darian began to tag along to meetings with funders and community stakeholders, and as she stated, doing that over and over again amplified my ways to express my ideas and to contribute to our organizational growth. There was never a time that I was told, "Nah, you can't do that," and instead I was asked, "How are you going to do that?" What Darian and her peers were doing was developing socially engaged art, a process of participatory community engagement focused on creative social action. Art is a catalyst for transformation, and socially engaged art bends the traditional concepts of aesthetics using inclusive practices and civic engagement to enact social change. At YouthFX, young people work together to learn technical skills like cinematography, sound recording, video editing, while engaging in a creative process rooted in democratic collaboration that directly interacts with the community they call home. Some of the films are narrative and others are documentaries, capturing the pulse of the community around them as seen through the eyes of young people. Their goal is not to be filmmakers. It's actually about seeking community collectively and exercising agency, the interplay of community and creativity. It's a healing space using the transformative medium of storytelling to engage young people in the future visioning of their own communities. The staff are made up of young people who came up through the program. Rashid, a co-founder of the program, started when he was in middle school, and he's now the technical director, inspiring a job development program with the local library system. Michael, well, he joined in high school and is now the creative director, an inspiration behind a full-service production company. Oh, and Darian, that quiet 15-year-old, well, she's the co-executive director and has advanced a renowned year-long fellowship for emerging documentary storytellers of color nationally. I don't have the time to list all the awards and film festivals these young people have won, and in fact, that may take away from what is truly the most important thing about this story. These young people show us that creative innovation, matched with attention to skill and capacity building centering young people's voices, transforms communities from the inside out. What we can learn from YouthFX is how to build on the prevention stance into an engagement stance. Programs like theirs, well, that's examples of macro-therapeutic interventions, focusing on social enterprise and participatory approaches to impact individuals intrapersonally while seeking broader structural impacts. Research demonstrates that young people that participate in arts programs have moderate to significantly higher rates of academic achievement, degree attainment, non-academic reading, library visits, volunteering, civic engagement, voting, the list goes on, and that these young people are significantly more likely to participate in other pro-social activities associated with increased self-efficacy and social cohesion that are foundational to collective efficacy and positive youth development. This work that I'm doing with YouthFX is more than research. It's about amplifying the untold story of kids who represent social resistance and transformation the rest of us wish we could embrace with such grace. Together, these young people face very real issues in their community, and they foster a healing, trauma-informed space that helps them to identify individually the belief that they have the capacity to create and collectively to use that creative energy to reclaim a sense of community. These young people remind us that when we open our eyes to multifaceted ways that we engage with the world around us, we tend to engage a little bit more. Through storytelling, communities can reclaim what defines them as told by them, grounded by a sense of community that acts as a center of gravity. It isn't about getting out in order to survive. It's about working together in order to thrive. Shukran.